Welcome to Sizzle Fantasy Sports, the channel with the most sizzling hot fantasy takes and analysis, presented by your host, Gavin.
Rodgers clean pocket, throws the middle to Yato, Devontae, touchdown, and a dagger!
How's it going, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're going to be doing some mock drafting using the Sleeper Fantasy website. For those of you out there who are unfamiliar with Sleeper Fantasy and the great tools they have for fantasy football players like ourselves to take advantage of, I think they're one of, if not the best, fantasy football mock drafting platforms on the market. They use something called average draft position to give us a really good feel for how the rest of the fantasy community feels about a given player and whether or not their stock is rising or falling heading into your league's draft day. So it's something that I think is incredibly valuable for us to utilize as fantasy football players. With that being said, if you guys haven't already, make sure you head down and click that subscribe button and turn the bell on before we get into today's episode so you never miss a future video or piece of content from myself or Eric here on the channel. So with that being said, we're not going to waste any more time and let's get right into the mock draft. All right, we're in the draft room here on Sleeper Fantasy, but before I kick things off, I forgot to plug the social medias and make sure to tell you guys to go check those out as well. So if you're interested in our TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter accounts, links to all three of those can be found in the description of this video, where you can get access to some more announcements and some more updates about the channel and content that we're creating here, as well as some additional content from Eric specifically on that TikTok account. He works pretty hard on it. He puts out some good stuff, so make sure you guys go check that out. But with that being said, we're picking with the 112 selection here in today's mock draft. So we're going to let the entire board and the computer show us that ADP I was talking about in the intro of this video. They're going to decide who falls to us here. This is a full PPR mock draft, so I'll be picking at the back end of the first round and then starting off the second round with that snake style mock. So with that being said, let's kick this off. All right, so unfortunately, as you all can probably see right now, the face cam that I have up for you pretty much covers up all of the available players. So I'll be walking you through all the selections that go on prior to my draft pick each round and talking about how I see the value for the players that are available at my position to be taken. So it looks like right off the bat here, 6 straight running backs from Kamara, Cook, McCaffrey, Henry, Chubb, and Barkley straight off the board. And then finally, Davante Adams falls down to the 1-7. Davante currently has Aaron Rodgers still as his quarterback in a full PPR league. I think I'd probably kick him ahead of maybe Barkley and Chubb just because of the scoring format. And obviously we have some uncertainty with Adams, but I would argue that with obviously Kareem Hunt in that backfield and Saquon Barkley coming back from an ACL, they have just as much, if not more, things to contemplate and question in their fantasy football value as well. But that's besides the point. Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and then Zeke Elliott come off the board after that, leaving us up here at the 112 to make our choice. For those of you, obviously, I don't think you can see my screen, so I'll make sure this roster is up the whole time so you can see the players I'm picking and be able to still be aware of all those players on the board, or at least what I've filled out on my roster to a point in the draft. Looking at the running back position, obviously, I think it's the popular trend for a lot of fantasy football creators out there, or content creators rather, to pick running back heavily early on the top of their drafts. I tend to stray a bit away from that. I think that running back is highly important to capitalize on and take advantage of. I apologize for that notification. I think it's important for players to capitalize on the running back position at least once within the top 2 rounds. But the whole strategy and philosophy that you need to pick running back 3 times in a row at the top of your draft boards is just ridiculous to me. I think you're absolutely limiting your upside here. And when I look at the backs that are available on the board, none of these guys are sure things besides maybe, honestly, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think any of them are sure things. So I think you go out here and pick a high upside running back in one of your first 2 rounds. And then after that, you play the board based off of best player available and the highest upside at a position. And I'm going to show you guys exactly what I mean by that, because obviously doing a mock draft here, you guys can do these on your own, but I'm trying to help you all formulate strategies and be able to go into these drafts with a plan of how to best attack this and how to walk away as winners in your draft. So me picking back-to-back here, I don't really think it matters quite too much who I take first. But with that being said, I'm going to take Travis Kelce off the board here first. This is a full PPR mock draft. And when you look at the positional scarcity, it is the argument that a lot of fantasy football creators make for needing to smash on running backs early, you can make that same argument in an even stronger one if you want to talk about that for tight ends. There's barely any consistently productive tight ends in fantasy football, and Travis Kelce is miles above the next best player. Darren Waller, George Kittle, those guys are really solid, but they have not produced up to the level of Travis Kelce. I think I'd actually rate Waller a slight step ahead of George Kittle because of availability and consistency, as well as touchdown production that he has put up over the past couple seasons. But nonetheless here, Travis Kelce at the 112 in a full PPR league, when Patrick Mahomes uses him as his safety blanket and the guy catches 10 to 12 balls a game, give me Travis Kelce every day of the week. The back end of the first round is a very great sweet spot, regardless of scoring format, to capitalize on Travis Kelce. Maybe he loses a little bit of value in standard leagues because you're not getting points for those extra catches. But in a full PPR league like we're mocking in today's video, that is a juicy bargain there at the back end of the top round. And then here, I'm going to be honest, you got to walk away with rounds 1 or 2 with at least one running back. While I don't love the heavy running back draft strategies, I do acknowledge running back is an extremely difficult position to draft and to find players at the proper value for. So I'm going to go Aaron Jones here of my Green Bay Packers at the 2.1 draft selection. If you want to talk about how his offseason has changed his fantasy outlook, A.J. Dillon steps into that number 2 position on the team. And I think that is actually quite beneficial to Aaron Jones and his fantasy value. The Packers have been very conservative with his touches over the past couple seasons. They don't let him handle the football that much when he's banged up or injured a little bit. But I think that changes this year. Jamal Williams is out of that backfield. They don't have quite as much of a cushion or depth at the position to afford to give Aaron Jones those rests. So I think he's going to see an increase in volume this year. I really do. Especially, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be on the move. I think that that's something that is going to require too much change from an organizational standpoint for the Packers to be willing to do, and I think it's going to be a tough task for them to get him out of there with all the cap money that he puts on the books if he is to walk away this season. Nonetheless, if he were to, I think that's all the more reason for even more production out of Aaron Jones. He's going to see a lot of work and checkdowns from whoever the quarterback, whether it be Jordan Love or another vet they acquire via trade. He's going to see a lot of work in that phase of the game, and then he's going to get a lot of those touches. And A.J. Dillon, unlike Jamal Williams, can't catch the football. He's not an incompetent pass catcher per se, but Jamal Williams was sneaky good at catching the football and being a really good run-after-catch receiver. That's not what A.J. Dillon's game is. He's a bruiser. He's a pound-for-pound, run-you-over type of back. Almost a Derrick Henry, but not nearly as good, obviously. So that's just kind of how Aaron Jones, I think, will actually see an uptick in fantasy production this season and ultimately be a really safe RB1 to have on your team. And last year, I considered him highly to be a top 5 running back for virtually the entirety of last season. Looking at the board here at the back end of the 3rd round, top of the 4th, it's probably important that I address the wide receiver position because one of the big things that I really like to do here is I like to capitalize on those high upside safe players early on, and then I like to have just good enough running backs to keep me afloat because at the end of the day, I don't think the running back position is what's winning me games in fantasy football. I think that you can't win in fantasy if you don't have competent enough level running backs. And obviously, if we're at the top of the draft board and we can get one of those tier 1A running backs, we're doing that every time and we're not thinking about it. That's your Dalvin Cooks, your Christian McCaffreys, your Alvin Kamara's, maybe even your Derrick Henrys. But when we start to fall into the back half of the first round, if you're drafting back there at the start of your board, those aren't going to be the guys that are going to go out there and win your leagues. It's important to draft a Stephon Diggs, a Tyreek Hill, those guys with crazy high upsides that can go out there and win your weeks in fantasy football. So we've already addressed the running back 1 position. I think I've gotten fairly good enough upside there out of Aaron Jones in a safe enough floor where I'm not feeling too terribly urgent to pick 2 running backs here with this spot. But I've also went out and gotten Travis Kelce, who's going to put me a mile ahead of the competition at that position in my fantasy lineup, give me super high upside in a really, really safe floor as well. So with this next pick, I would like to address the wide receiver position, and at the top or the back end of the 3rd round, I think this is a great time to take Michael Thomas. And Michael Thomas certainly has risks, barely played it all last season, but Michael Thomas was the wide receiver 1, set the single season receptions record in 2019. He was phenomenal, and he doesn't have Drew Brees anymore. We already know that, but I don't think that a drastic quarterback change, while he might see a reduction in production from that 2019 season and might not ever get back to that point in time, I still think that this guy is going to be a stud. If he can stay healthy and on the field, he is by far and away the best wide receiver on that roster, and they absolutely need to feed him the football. I don't care if it's Jameis Winston. If it is Jameis Winston, that honestly might be a match made in heaven for fantasy football owners, and he might see a ton of deep balls and a lot of opportunities to make big splash and impact plays. So Michael Thomas as my wide receiver 1 selection here at the last pick in the 3rd round. I think that's great value. I think it has a really, really safe floor in a PPR format because of how much volume he's been utilized from in the past and how much upside he has because if he's able to produce with his opportunities, Mike Thomas is going to be a pretty dangerous wide receiver 1 to have on my roster again. So then I think here at the 4.1, I'd rather not wait until the last pick in the 5th round at this current draft spot to take my second running back. So looking at the board here, I've kind of already made a decision, but I'll walk you through it really quick. Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, these are guys who have super high upside and could potentially be league winners at the end of the year. But based off how I started to construct this roster, I'm waiting at least another draft cycle to take these players. And obviously, based off of what we see out of their ADP here, 31.8 is the ADP for Najee Harris, so that's pretty much already passed, and 34.8 for Travis Etienne. Those guys are going to be long gone by my next pick. I need to pick a safer running back here with this selection because, like I said, I need just good enough running backs for how I'm building this team to stay afloat because I'm looking for high upside out of other positions, but I don't want to take too much of a risk and fall flat on my face here. So I'm going to take David Montgomery at the 4-1. Right now, based off of ADP, that looks like a little bit of a reach, but I'm actually going to be kind of campaigning this offseason for David Montgomery to see an increase in that ADP and start being drafted a bit earlier. When you look at the landscape of what David Montgomery has to go up against this season, it's a joke. The Packers' run game, I'm a Packer fan, their run game stinks, or excuse me, their run stop stinks. They've got holes all over the defensive line. They don't even play true defensive alignment with 4 hands in the dirt. They've got Zadarius Smith down there playing D-end, and the only thing he cares about is rushing the passer. He's just trying to get sacks. He constantly shoots through gaps, over-pursues in the run game, and leaves a gaping hole, and bam, there goes David Montgomery, big old carry, touchdown. He plays the Lions twice a year. Detroit addressed their defense a lot in the draft, but their run game was their run stop was the worst in the NFL last season. You can't go from worst to first. It just doesn't happen. They might be slightly better, but this is still an advantageous situation for Montgomery to be just in division. Then you look at the Vikings. They're average at best in that unit. They do get Danielle Hunter back this season, but he's obviously more of a pass rusher, a really great all-around player, though. I think that the situation is just really good for Montgomery, and the fact that they've got a rookie quarterback, and then before that, they're using Andy Dalton, who's not just going to light it up and throw the ball 50 times a game. They're going to need to rely on the run game. He's going to see a nice amount of volume, and he went absolutely crazy to end last season. So I think that you're looking at a guy who is probably going to end up putting up high-end numbers here. So with that being said, I need to take a look at the draft board because I haven't given any consideration to my next picks here. In a previous test run I did before this video, Josh Allen actually fell to me here at the 5-12, and I snatched him up in a second. But it looks like he ended up going there at the 5.8, so I've got another decision to make on my hands here. I'm not too in love with any of these running backs. Maybe I walk away with one of them, another one, just a safer pick here to take at this 5-12 selection. But I think that wide receiver might be the way to go here. Only got Michael Thomas on the roster so far, but there are some players that I really, really like here. Brandon Ayuk, highly intriguing, ended the season on a hot streak, was super consistent down the stretch, and a really dependable player. Then you look at a guy like DJ Chark here on the board, who's going to get Trevor Lawrence, and maybe Trevor Lawrence brings out the best that he has to offer. I think that could be something highly advantageous for this team. I'm currently considering doing something a little bit against the grain here and taking a quarterback, but I don't really like the risk that Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson have associated with them at this current moment in time. So I'm going to actually take Brandon Ayuk with my first pick here at the 5-12. It might, again, seem a little bit early, but look at the rest of these guys. I'd take Brandon Ayuk, to be honest, today over Juju Smith-Schuster and Odell Beckham Jr. I think that those guys have a lot of talent, but the production level hasn't been there. OBJ has been super hot and cold over the last 2 or 3 years of his career. He just hasn't gotten to a rhythm with the Browns. He's not seeing the high volume that you probably want to see out of him. And if he doesn't make a splash play in a game, he's not going to produce you those great numbers. So there's definitely risk with him there. And I think that that's something that you have to highly consider. We've got some other solid running backs that I'm looking at here, but none of these guys are really pure and true starters that I absolutely fall in love with here off the bat. I think that based off of what I'm seeing here, I'm going to go with Myles Gaskin over guys like David Johnson, Raheem Mostert, James Conner, Kareem Hunt here. His ADP is 72.5, so I'm almost falling directly in line with that. My thought behind taking Myles Gaskin here at the 6-1 is that he is simply the guy in the situation with the opportunity to get the most amount of touches in a per-game basis. Kareem Hunt can be really productive at times, especially when Nick Chubb is off the field. But Nick Chubb is, to be honest, he's frequently available, and he got banged up for 4 games last year, and Hunt came in, and he was excellent in those games. But at the end of the day, Myles Gaskin, the only thing that he's really got working against him that they addressed this offseason was they brought in Malcolm Brown from the Rams, and they've got, Salvon Ahmed that came in when Gaskin was hurt earlier that past season. So Gaskin's a guy who's been really productive in the passing game. I really like that phase of his value in fantasy football. And I think he's a really great RB3 to have on your team. I don't love having him as a week-to-week starter at that RB2 position. And to be honest, in a full PPR league, I'm probably looking to flex another wide receiver or a guy who's going to get a lot of receiving upside. And since Gaskin does that, I think it gives me some more flexibility and options to do that there. So that's why I like taking him with that pick. Let's take a look at quarterbacks here and make sure we can capitalize on any value that falls to us. Joe Burrow and Kirk Cousins, as well as Trevor Lawrence, are oddly going ahead of Tom Brady in these drafts. That's oddly surprising. And Matthew Stafford. That's crazy. Justin Fields being taken ahead of Matt Stafford as well, based off of this ADP that we have here. So that's quite interesting information, actually. I think that's a bit flawed, and I think some players need to more heavily consider their decision-making there. Nonetheless, here I've got back-to-back picks at the end of the 7th round, at the top of the 8th round. I'm thinking I might go running back one more time, and I think I'm going to start it off here with Ronald Jones. This pick is something I like to do a lot here. I've just solidified 4 running backs who are just good enough to get me production on my team. I know that if I have injuries, I can count on these players. And yeah, Ronald Jones is not necessarily the lead back in that Tampa Bay backfield, but I know that when Leonard Fournette misses games, which I'm almost positive that he will again this season, Ronald Jones is going to come in and produce like a beast. He's been a monster when given the opportunity to produce for the Buccaneers in that offense. And I think it's kind of a shame, to be honest, that Bruce Arians doesn't just cut him free and let him be the lead back, because he would be really, really productive, I think, if they gave him the full work share. But Ronald Jones, Myles Gaskin, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, that's a group I feel highly confident in here. And then I love topping that off with Michael Thomas at the end of the 3rd and Travis Kelce at the end of the 4th, at the end of the 1st, to give me super high upside and really nice ceiling at those tight end 1 and wide receiver 1 positions. And then I think Ayuk also gives a high level of floor ability and some nice ceiling as well. He's the guy that we see get those end arounds, those wide receiver run game type plays, and be a really versatile piece that can be used by Kyle Shanahan in that offense. And then right here, I love this pick almost immediately just off seeing this for the first time. I've got Deontay Johnson on the board here. The decision is between him and Chase Claypool. I'm going Deontay Johnson every time. Did you see how many times Ben Roethlisberger targeted this guy last season? It was crazy. He was over 100 targets before a lot of the rest of the NFL was. And the only thing that really held him back was drops and the fact that the Steelers just had no run game, so it was really predictable when that was coming. I think Deontay Johnson is a super high volume guy. And if you're looking for freebie points in a PPR league, this is a great flex or wide receiver 2 player, because he's going to see a ton of those targets and have a lot of opportunities to be productive in that offense. I see guys I really like. Will Fuller here. If he wasn't suspended, I'd probably snatch him up before Deontay Johnson, but that suspension is probably not going to be lifted. So we'll go Deontay here at the top of the 8th round. Like I said, Will Fuller, super high upside, produced great for the Texans last season, but dealing with some suspensions because of that substance abuse policy violation that he committed at the end of last year. It's probably time to start consider quarterback here for me. Tom Brady's still on the board at the moment, but he might fly off, and he actually does fall to me down here at the 9-12. Here you guys can see the starting lineup of the roster and how that's shaping out here. I think this is an appropriate spot at the end of the 9th, top of the 10th round to take a guy like Tom Brady. Quarterback is one of the least positionally scarce positions in fantasy football. So that's not something that you urgently need to approach. Like I said earlier in the draft, though, had a guy with as much upside and as high of a ceiling and floor as Josh Allen. If he would have fell to me at the 5-12, I would have snatched him up and pivoted my draft strategy a little bit. That's another thing that's really important. You got to be able to pivot and have a plan B and even a plan C when heading into draft day, because things can change just like that. And you never know who another player is going to take. Dynasty, you can do a little bit more discussion, a little bit more research into the top of the board for those rookie drafts and whatnot. But when you're doing a 15 to 20 round redraft league, you have no idea where people are headed, and they've got their own little cheat sheet and whatnot. By the way, if you're looking for a fantasy football cheat sheet, make sure to head over to sizzlefantasy.com and check out our draft guide collection kit, where you can get access to our personal draft day cheat sheet form, that we'll be filling out and creating for you guys heading into draft season. So just another little bit of insight into some stuff that we're working on here at the channel. Nonetheless here, though, you don't know what other players are going to do in your fantasy leagues. There is such a wide array of options that they could go with every draft pick that you can look at their team, you can guess, you can look at what positions they need that are still available on the board and try and make some insight in that phase. But at the end of the day, you still need to come prepared. You need to know what you're doing, because there's a lot of stuff that happens, and it happens really quick. So make sure you stick around here and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, so we can help you make some of those tough choices and help you be guided onto the right path here as we get into the draft season, which is by far and away the most important part of your fantasy league. You can't win your draft. You can't win your league, on draft day. You can absolutely lose it. I've lost on draft day before, and I've learned from that, and I've pivoted and adapted my strategy and learned how to be a better fantasy player. I've been doing this for quite some time. I've been playing fantasy since I was a little tyke, and so I've learned very quickly what works, what doesn't work, and so I'm here to share that with you guys and try and help you also become the best fantasy players you're capable of being. So when we look at my roster here, let's do a quick little roster check. Tom Brady as the QB1 with that slew of weaponry that he has in Tampa Bay. Aaron Jones, David Montgomery heading off that top two running back unit. Michael Thomas and Brandon Ayuk. I think that's a pretty darn solid wide receiver core as well to just start with those top two guys. Not exactly the best unit, not the most high upside with Ayuk, but I still think there is a little something there, and if Michael Thomas gets back to form, this could be a pretty nasty team. Travis Kelce at the tight end, the best tight end in pro football and fantasy football. I think that ends up pretty well for us. Then Myles Gaskin, Ronald Jones, and Deontay Johnson to kind of work with there as our flex. I guess I have this as a two flex league as well, which is what I like to do instead of having kickers. But I think this is, in terms of a depth perspective, there's a lot of players that could come in and start right away for this football team, or this fantasy team rather, and I think that ends up boding pretty well for all teams that have that depth, because injuries are going to happen throughout the course of a season, and you need to make sure that you are prepared and equipped with the information to know the injury risk associated with every player, which can be found here on the SFS channel by heading to sizzlefantasy.com and checking out our draft kits. We'll be putting out some injury analysis and some risk radars for given players in those draft profiles. So I've got about a minute left here. I've been rambling. I've been talking a lot to you all. I need to make a choice. I've got a lot of players on the board here. I've already addressed tight end and quarterback. Not too worried about that. I think we go and invest into the flex position again here with this next pick. I saw one name I really liked, but I already lost him, so I should probably just head back to the running back position. Someone I think is highly underrated right now, and I think I might actually top off my running back group here and just kind of call it good here for the rest of this draft, is I think I'm going to take Tevin Coleman. And for some reason, Duke Johnson's ahead of him in ADP. Chuba Hubbard, Michael Carter, Tony Pollard, these guys are all fine players. I don't know why they're going ahead of Tevin Coleman here. This is a no-brainer for me. Tevin Coleman is penciled in as a starter right now. And yes, it's for the Jets. Do the Jets stink? Yes. But this is an upgrade from every running back they've had in the past 3 years. I mean, he's better than Frank Gore. He's better than Michael P. Ryan. He's better than Ty Johnson. Tevin Coleman's coming in. He's going to lead this backfield day one. And do I think Tevin Coleman will play 16 games and finish the year healthy? Absolutely not. I know he's going to get hurt. It's just a matter of time. And like I talked about, you got to know that when you draft a player. You can't bank on Tevin Coleman being your RB2 down here in the 10th round. But if I need to plug and play for a week, I think I can absolutely do that. He's got a tough division. The schedule isn't great, but at least he's playing a last place schedule. That helps him out for some of the other non-divisional games. But Tevin Coleman's going to get a lot of volume early on, and while he's healthy, I think he's going to be productive. Michael Carter might come in there and snatch some of that receiving game and that receiving volume out of the backfield, but I think Tevin Coleman as a pure running back as my RB5 on my roster. It's a pretty darn deep group. And you see, I took one running back in the top 3 rounds. I addressed my second running back position in round 4, and I feel really great about the player I took there in David Montgomery. There's absolutely more than one way to go about doing that. More than one way, to go about doing this thing that doesn't involve drafting 3 running backs at the top of the board, because that kills your upside. And then you're looking at receivers as your top guys who, yeah, they have a nice floor and they're consistent, but they provide you no upside. And when those running backs you took in the second and third round don't either, you're looking at a pretty depleted roster for your overall ceiling and what you can do on a week-to-week basis, and that can end up killing you at times in leagues. So here it's probably time to take another receiver. I think I only go 3 deep at the position right now, so I definitely need to invest some more capital into that position there. I think a player I really like just off of a first glance look here, here's a little bit of rookie fever here with these guys being overvalued. I think I'm going to turn around and take a guy like Robbie Anderson. And I was really contemplating between him and Marvin Jones with the Jaguars. Both guys, actually, I have back-to-back picks, so look at that. I can take Marvin Jones here with my second pick. And I'm even going to go with him over Devontae Parker, and I don't really have a second thought about that as well. Marvin Jones and Robbie Anderson are in offenses that have young quarterbacks. Sam Darnold obviously finally getting really a fair chance there to play in Carolina. And Robbie Anderson was really good last year with only Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. And when you think about Teddy Bridgewater, yes, I think he's a competent starting level player for an NFL team, not a fantasy team. He was not a productive fantasy player last year. But I think that he's a capable NFL quarterback of distributing the ball to his talented receivers. And he was able to do just enough of that where Robbie Anderson was a really high-level production wide receiver 2 type player. Add in Sam Darnold, a player who's going to, he played with him in New York with the Jets, and we saw the connection those guys had at times where they were making long ball splash plays. Add that into that offense where they've got a lot of other moving pieces. They can't really focus on Robbie Anderson. You've got DJ Moore. You just drafted Terrace Marshall and CMC, obviously, being the big attention getter for defenses. That's going to leave a lot of room for Robbie Anderson to work with in that defense, and I think he's going to have a lot of splash plays. As a wide receiver 4 on my team, I think that's a pretty darn good steal there at the end of the 11th round. And then topping it off with my next receiver off the board and Marvin Jones, another bad football team with the Jets. The Jags. They're going to be trying to catch up. Trevor Lawrence, super pro style, super ready pro quarterback, best QB in the 2021 draft class. He's going to come in and I think knock expectations out of the park. And I think Marvin Jones, being the most veteran wide receiver in that unit, he's going to come out there and be pretty darn productive pretty early, I would assume as well. We might even see him outscore DJ Chark this year. I wouldn't even be too shocked about that. So unfortunately, my favorite value quarterback, Ryan Tannehill here, went at the 13-3 ahead of my draft position. So, and then Matt Ryan, who would have also been a steal with all those weapons he has to work with in Atlanta, goes a pick before us here at the 13-11. That's a bit disappointing. I really like the idea of a Cole Beasley here, although I am a bit worried that he loses out on some of that slot value to Emmanuel Sanders in Buffalo now. Let's look at this quarterback market here. So we've got Wentz, Darnold, Winston, Danny Dimes, Jalen Hurts. I hate to be left high and dry, and if something ends up happening to Tom Brady, I don't want to be out of luck here with the quarterback market. So I'm going to go and pick Jalen Hurts here. He's got rushing upside. We saw him have a 100-yard rushing game against the Saints. The first team to ever do that in like 4 years was the Eagles, and they had 200-yard rushers in one day with Miles Sanders and Hurts. So that was quite ridiculous. Add in Devontae Smith. That's an increase for his fantasy value in the passing production side of things. So I think there's a lot of things going well for Jalen Hurts this offseason as long as he is able to lock down that starting position. Still some solid running backs on the board here. Nothing I'm too committed to taking here at the top of the 14th round that I feel like I absolutely have to smash the draft button on. Kylan Hill for Green Bay is not someone I would take over some of these other players. This is, like I said, this is rookie fever. Players are getting really excited about rookie draft picks, and that's driving their ADP up, which confuses the system and makes them get drafted a little bit earlier than they should be. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world here because I'm still able to talk to you guys and at least inform you about that stuff here. So there are some receivers I like, and I'm actually going to go. I don't love doing this. I'm not a huge Michael Pittman guy, so that's why I'm so willing to pass on him here. I'm going to double up with the San Francisco wide receivers. I can't believe Deebo Samuel is falling to the 14th round. I know he had injury concerns last season. I know he got banged up and didn't really play that much, but that guy's dynamite. He's lightning when he's on the football field, and he just makes plays. Like I talked about with Ayuk, Kyle Shanahan uses him so diversely, and I felt like as a rookie, I was just in awe of what Deebo Samuel did as a runner on those end arounds and those screen passes after the catch. He's so sensational. His open line or his open field quickness and burst is really eye-catching, and it's something that you got to pay attention to, because in the open field, Deebo Samuel is a special player, and I think that he's being atrociously undervalued there at that 14.1 spot as a player that can come in on my roster as my wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My wide receiver 6 that I selected was Deebo Samuel. That's ridiculous to me because I think he can be a starter potentially for teams at some point next season. So just showing you the value that can fall to you here. And maybe this is to say, look at all, okay, so players here that don't have profile pictures, just count up all these rookies. These are guys who, not all of them are going to go after Deebo Samuel, but probably guys like Trey Lance, who he's not going to be a day one starter. He's not going before Deebo Samuel. Dwayne Eskridge for Seattle, probably not going before, he went after, but still. Diami Brown, probably not going before Deebo Samuel. Rookie players have a lot of value and a lot of upside in these leagues, but at the end of the day, I don't think it warrants them being picked that much higher than a guy entering his third season who's been highly productive. And with that being said, I can get another guy down here. Great value to capitalize on here. Nelson Agholor, probably the most explosive wide receiver on the Patriots depth chart right now, is my wide receiver 7. Falls to me there at the 15-12. And I'm able to get a guy who is going to come in there, and if they have any sense of a passing game, look what he did for Derek Carr and that Raiders offense last year. He didn't have very many catches, not very much volume, but when he had the opportunity, he really produced, and it was very impressive to see that from him. So winding down here, only 4 more picks in this draft. I do have to pick a starting defense at some level. Basically, all of them are still here, and the Washington football team is the first team I'd take off the board. I'm absolutely fine with letting a Tampa Bay or San Francisco fall to me if I'm the third team to hit on defense. Don't overdraft defense and kickers, you guys. It's a waste of your draft capital, and it's a waste of investment. Something I can go out here and do, though, is probably invest into the tight end market. I've got one really elite tight end here, obviously, in the first round with Travis Kelce. But you'd hate to see something happen to him. He gets injured, and then your team takes a huge step off a cliff. Jared Cook, by no means. Oops, I accidentally pulled him up here. There you go, guys. Look at Jared Cook. Jared Cook, by no means, is a top 5 fantasy tight end, but I love the situation he has going to the Chargers and playing with Justin Herbert. To me, that's a really attractive fantasy situation. And I think that for an offense that lost production from a guy like Hunter Henry leaving, Jared Cook is maybe even better after the catch, and I think he can be very productive. And wow, so forget me saying I was going to be the third team to capitalize on defense here. Look at that. Literally, the Sleeper Fantasy database has 11 straight defenses going here. For some odd reason, the Lions defense is off the board, and the Jags. That's highly questionable. I'm not really sure. And they just allowed... Okay. That's kind of a joke. That needs to get fixed. But the Washington football team just fell to me over the Seahawks, Eagles, Rams, Titans, Dolphins, Colts, Bucks, Packers, Lions, Steelers, and Jags defenses. Maybe the only defenses that went in that group that you could argue are as valuable as the Washington football team: Tampa Bay, Los Angeles, that being the Rams, and Miami. Done. End of discussion. And I don't think Miami's taken in the same stratosphere either, because they don't have a Chase Young on their team, where at least Tampa Bay has, Shaq Barrett and JPP to rush the passer, and the Rams have Aaron Donald. I just got myself two boundary corners that have shutdown potential. Chase Young, a front 4 that's highly elite. That was a steal there for me. And I don't think that's quite fair or realistic there for me at that spot. But we're going 19 rounds today. I've got 2 more picks, so the starting lineup is filled out here. 2 minutes, so we won't rush this. Tom Brady, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Michael Thomas, Brandon Ayuk, Travis Kelce, Myles Gaskin, Ronald Jones, and that Washington football defense to be able to cap off the starting unit there. And then on the bench here, this is some great depth if you ask me. Tevin Coleman, Robbie Anderson, Marvin Jones, Jalen Hurts, Deebo Samuel, Nelson Aguilar, and Jared Cook. I'm feeling really good about this group. I think I've shown a pretty good example of how you can draft here at the back end of the first round even. Take one running back off the board in the first 3 rounds and still capitalize on the rest of your team and put together a really special group. I think that day one, this team probably, I haven't looked at the rest of these rosters in depth, but I would open up the season with this team here at the 112 being the favorites to win the entire league. I think it has the most depth, and it can handle the most injury situations of any other team in this league. Maybe we're lacking some upside at the running back positions, but we make up for that with the wide receiver and tight end positions that we've drafted here. Nelson Aguilar is a guy who has crazy high upside. Play him against the Jets. He's got 2 games a year against the Jets. He could pop off against a terrible secondary that was atrocious and exposed on the regular basis last season. So, and before I get too ahead of myself, I just saw this diamond in the rough here. And Mike Davis for the Atlanta Falcons, currently penciled in as the day one starter. Just capitalizing on some more value here to find easy players to take advantage of. And it looks like I'll have the last pick in this entire draft. So at that 19-12. But Mike Davis at the 18-1 is crazy in a 12-team league. I just picked up a guy who's going to come in and see the bulk of the carries for this team for the first at least 4 weeks of this season. Maybe he gets hurt. Maybe he's not super overly productive, but he's trade bait. And you can go out there and flip a guy. Maybe a top-end running back gets hurt, and you package up Mike Davis and one of these receivers that have some really nice upside on the bench here, or even an Ayuk, and you go out there and put together a package to get you another top-end running back. So building depth on your fantasy team matters. Maybe your draft day roster is nothing like your end of season roster, but if you can at least capitalize and get a lot of value, a lot of depth, a lot of high-end starting level players, you're putting yourself in a good spot to make high-level trades, to make impact moves for your team, and to just be set up for success. So my last pick here, I think I might finally invest into the rookie market. I think we'll take Elijah Moore to end this off here. Obviously, he'll be playing slot for Zach Wilson in that Jets offense. I think he's someone that's really explosive and has a really, really high ceiling. Another one of those guys that can just be kind of a throw at the dartboard there, and you're hoping he turns out, you're hoping he pans out and turns into a good player. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't at the 19-12, it's not that big of an investment. It's not that big of a risk. It's great if he works, but if it doesn't totally derail your team. Alrighty, there you have it. That was my most recent mock draft of the 2021 fantasy football season. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to head down and give this video a like and subscribe to the channel and turn the bell on. Like I said at the beginning of this thing, so you never miss an episode or never miss a piece of content from myself or Eric here on the channel. Also, a quick shout out to you guys at the end of the video here. Go get yourself hooked up with some SFS merch on our website, sizzlefantasy.com. If you're still here, you should probably just go do it. Go rep the brand. Go check us out. We've got a lot of great content for you out there, so stick around with us, and we're going to have a great fantasy season this year in 2021. So, without further ado, thank you so much for sticking with me today. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. I'll see you all next time. Peace out.